So our next speaker is Lata. Lata is a planner, architect, and a GIS analyst. She has a degree in architecture and a master's in regional planning. Prior to coming to Auroville in 2003, she was a project manager at ESRI, the Environmental Systems Research Institute, a private company devoted to building GIS, the Geographic Information Systems, software and applications for many industries. With that, I will hand over now.
With this presentation, I've been invited, as I think, to present the regional context. But what I'm going to do is use the context and talk about what the implications are for the current process, for the Crown. That's my main aim through this presentation. So the context will be, I'll try to bring the context back to the Crown and what it means when we are talking about the Crown. Now this is something that everyone knows. I don't have to explain. This is just to put a context. This here shows a little bit of the topography we are in. So this is the ECR, this is the other highway, and this is Auroville. This is the Kaliveri tank. So this shows the fact, actually the next slide will show it even better, that in that landscape, this is the ridge and this is the plateau on which we have Auroville here, like I showed earlier. So we sit on top of the ridge. This is a detail of the same, how we are placed in the landscape. This is something that has relevance for what we are doing. So, as you know, that this entire southern peninsula is a landscape of areas or water catchments, and they are woven together by overflow channels. So they are harvesting the water that comes during the rains so that it can be used and extended through the rest of the year. So you can see that you have pond, overflow, pond, overflow, pond, overflow, pond, overflow. So that is how the whole thing is woven together. And this is the watershed of the Kaliveri watershed. We are sitting here, and this forms part of this large watershed. So basically, whatever we do here has an impact downstream to Kaliveri. That could mean many things in terms of water that flows off, runoff, erosion, pollutants. All of that impacts what happens here downstream. This side flows into the ocean. This is a subset of that same watershed. You see the ridge line here. You see what we could call micro watersheds. And this here is the Crown. So you can, through this, understand where the water is flowing towards. So everything on this side is flowing towards here. So this is something that flows through here. This flows through here. This flows through here, like that. So when you look at the Crown, you can see which watershed, each of the sections, if you will, fall into, and how the water is going to behave in that landscape. For example, if you take this stretch, approximately half this watershed is going to drain through a few points. I think in the next slide I'll have the water channels as well, so you will see more clearly how the water flows. Okay, before that, going on the topography as well, you can see that this is a profile of the Crown. So basically, starting from the stretch that is already built from here, somewhere here, going down like that. So that is the profile. Of course, these little bumps are trees. So actually, the topography is probably like straight like that, But because of the trees, you have all these. But it also shows where are our in that profile, where are our wooded areas. So you can see the recent flashpoints are pretty clearly, you can note from the topography itself. So this is the lowest point. The highest is close to 50 something, 53 or 52 meters. The lowest point here, which is here in Darkali, in one of the canyons adjacent to Darkali, which is 42 meters. So essentially, from here, you have this going down here and then coming up here, which is normal because you saw that the ridge was going like that. This here shows the streams. It's a coarse level, but you can see that, how the streams are going through the landscape here. This one goes into Irumbai and then down like that. This one goes towards the sea. And if you notice some of these are, the green that you see here is TDF, forest, regenerated forests. And there is a strong correlation in many cases, and it would have been in all if we were even more careful about where we planted and everything. But you can see that this Darkali here is between these two canyons, so water from here goes there. This here is that flows toward this, and goes to a pond here, which then connects back to Kariveli outside. So you can see a little further, in this map, this is academic at this point, you can see that this light red is the village. So this is the village here. This is the village. So Kotagara village is here. So these are the villages. This here is temple land. So you can see a few pockets here and there. The orange plus the green is what Auroville owns at the moment. So you can probably see that pretty much very close to everything is owned, except in the crown you'll see a few gaps through which you are able to see the unowned land by Auroville. And in the green belt you can see how little is owned by Auroville and how little actually, and so you have, in larger parts of the green belts are actually settlements and temple land and such. Now this is a big one in considering anything that has to do with mobility. This is the regional mobility. So you can see that these are all the different ways that people are entering over. There are minor pathways, other places also through which they are able to enter, but these are some of the major ones. This is the tar road. This is Kuilapalim. So this is the tar road that connects to the highway here, that connects to the ECR here. Currently, this is used as the bypass, or people passing through Auroville. They are currently passing through the periphery of the city, or city area. And these are, so these are the main tarred roads. These are motorable roads, which are not tarred currently. If you see this road, for example, if someone has to get to the center from here, they go like that right now. There is another alternative, which we do see a lot of people walking around here, people who live in this area. There's Madhuka, Sukhavati. They will probably tell that there are a lot of people who show up in cars here and ask for where the Matri Mandir is or where the solar kitchen is and stuff, because there is a reasonably wide road here. Now, preference for roads by tourists, by us, by everyone is determined by how wide it is, so how fast I can go, and how good it is. So currently, the thing that is a big deterrent here is that it is not a very good road. It's not easily motorable. There are potholes, So majority of the people still prefer this. When we are actually thinking of the crown here now, this circle, this little arc is the already built crown road. So when we are thinking of the crown road as as a circle or whatever currently, whatever the thinking is, that is something that we need to be thinking about, this larger picture. For example, this is already a road that is there, and this is where the crown would be. When you create a new road, that attracts its own traffic. So the traffic sometimes get divided between two. So if we put the crown here, let's say, this traffic will get divided. Some people will go like this, some people will go like that. And you would have two parallel roads pretty much, this is just an example, pretty close to each other, serving the same purpose. So you need to think about that as well. I'll leave it at that because a detailed mobility analysis has been done. However, it hasn't been done recently, so meaning in the last year or so, no. This is another zooming into the mobility. Now we are talking internally how people move around. So these are the centers of big activity. This is the town hall area, this is the Bharat Nivas area, this is the visitor center. So you can see this is the Auroville and those areas. So, and this is the solar kitchen. So you see that currently what we have pretty much serves the purpose of getting to these places. And here is the crown, the dotted is the crown. So currently, what we should be thinking about is the stretch that has been made. I think people, I myself am guilty of it sometimes. We go as fast as we can possibly go in these areas because it's a nice road. We don't have that many, great roads. So this area is where the residential zone 1 and 2 is, and the cultural zone here. So we need to be thinking about what are the elements that bring a slowdown on traffic, more pedestrian activity, a streetscape rather than a road that we should be looking at over here. Actually, in 2015, under Doshi, I, as part of the technical team, had done a Crown development guidelines for just residential zone 1 and 2. Taking all of that. So pulling from the master plan, pulling from conversations that we had with people in sessions on dreaming. It wasn't dream weaving, but it was still dreaming about what could the crown be. And so that guidelines is something that I think I can pass on to the dream weavers. I think I'll leave this one also out there, because I think we can move on.
What are the colors represented, Lata?
What colors?
All the colors of the map: purple, red, orange, dark green.
I think the only important ones are these, because these are relating to mobility. I've just used a background map. This is TDEF. The red are roads or paths or transportation corridors. This thing is water. The blue that you see is water. And the green that you see is Auroville-owned lands. Okay, now I switch to something that we had done at the request of Madam Secretary, where she called us to not dream, but envision the crown. So as we looked at the crown with the lens of, the topography, the landscape, the people, where Auroville people are, all that has preceded us, that informs us in terms of understanding. So we came up with a few typologies. There could be more, but this is all based on what the master plan predicts there, what zone this section is in, what is the landscape telling us, what are the socioeconomic factors that affect us, what is the mobility that is going to affect us. So we have divided it into these sections. And you can see, so solar kitchen is, this is the circle here. So you can see this is the crown that is already built, going from there. So you can see. So I will just touch upon a few to explain what method we used in order to say what we are saying. So I'll go, I think I will skip this just for the simple reason that this is something that we have done in detail in the Crown guidelines. So I'll skip this part. This is the part that we have actually made the Crown guidelines for way back, you know. So I will not talk about that, but okay, I'll still show the visuals because we imagine it to be a shared space, you know, with things on both sides. Anyway, it's part of the residential zone, which basically means that you have social amenities that are there. So some of them are currently there, for example, library. Some others can be there. We don't have any cafes, or we don't have anything that you can just walk to in the morning, get a cup of coffee, come back. There are a whole bunch of things that are not there. But that is, and nowhere where actually you can feel that it's a street and not a motorized, you know. So that streetscape is something that we want to create in that stretch. That's what we are proposing. Oh, another thing that we have done in the proposal for this is also identified what is happening there. Basically, what does the landscape tell us? What is the socioeconomic, the growth that has happened till now done? And what does it tell us? Then looked at what the master plan says should come in those areas, looked at current realities and said what we should do now and what we could do in the long term. So that's how we've structured it as well. This is an important one, mainly because of Aura Dam here. So currently, the uses, so its topography is similar to the center, which is 50-something meters and everything from the sea level. This is the part that overflows and goes into the Irumbai Lake. This is the live water body that is there. You can see it right now after the rains. So this is the section that I think I touched upon in the mobility one as well, that currently this is how people go and this is how it is proposed. So what we are recommending is that this could be for internal Auroville traffic, you know, especially pedestrian and walking, and maybe cyclists as well. But it should not be motorized at all because we don't want this to be a bypass to, you know, an alternative to this. People can continue like that for now. In the long term, and plus this could be, in terms of uses that could be proposed. Now this is like a brief, but I'm sure Dreamweavers will dream their own brief. This is, we have said that this, from here, you could have, you know, some kind of pathways that already exist to the dam itself, the water body itself, and then one could potentially have interpretive walk, you know, around it or things like that. Basically a recreational kind of area here, low impact, respecting the ecology, not all of it opened up. That's what we see in the, so it could, you know, these are just images to, you know, some of them are from here, this is from here, but, you know, all the things that could be there, you could have bike rest areas, you know, things like that. This is how the Aura Dam area looks like. So, you know, you can see this is a bad perspective because it makes it look very, very vast, but whatever one we could find from different places, we put to kind of demonstrate what we mean by, you know, what we could do there. This is the other stretch that has been the focus of attention for a while, in recent times anyway. And I think I touched upon it before as well. So you have these two canyons that, you know, are in the periphery or even part of that. And what happens here? Currently, the current uses here are, well, you have water catchment ponds, you have pathways, you have this, which is a jogging track or a walking track. So, so what we have proposed in the short term here is that again, it should be something that actually should not be opened up or connect to any road per se. One could design some kind of walking track or whatever. However, the access to should be from within at different points and not a connecting thing that moves from one end to the other. And of course, interpretive centers and even things about the trees that are there, because this area does have some unique trees. And whatever happens here is going to affect downstream Kotakarai and all that. So, and there is a lot of water that is caught, that is conserved here. So this here is, again, you have it's in the cultural zone. So you have the school here, you have a youth center on this side, you have the forest on that side, because this is the park. This is the park, as noted in the master plan. So again, here we are recommending similar uses to what we had said in the previous ones, except this would have these kinds of activities that attract school-going population. So again, their exposure to nature, field walks, nature club. People from outside, also from schools, can potentially work, come and look at whatever exhibits, maybe something for residences for youth. So those kinds of things here that we are saying around the Crown. Because, bear in mind, the Crown is a corridor of amenities that serve the zone in which the Crown is. So the focus is on the amenities, not necessarily how. So the road could be just a service road for all we care. It could be a streetscape for all we care, because we only need to provide services so that goods and services can go easily, provided, because considering Auroville is moving, it's trying to move toward pedestrian and friendly city. So the road is just a service road for emergency services and for providing services to the Crown. So this is again some images just to show what it could be, interpretive center, giving information about the species there, and then you have some places where people can hang out, all modeled after some of the stuff that you can say happens elsewhere also. These are all images from different national parks in the United States. And so that brings me to the end of the Crown thing. Now, before I finish, I want to say something about planning. Planning happens at many different levels. So obviously, there is a hierarchy in planning. So you have regional plan, you have city plan, you have urban design, you have art. So in that spectrum, there is architect, urban designer, city planner, regional planner. So that's the spectrum within which it operates. And each geography determines what goes into the thinking of about that particular scale. So in a regional plan, you have to take a lot more things into account, like mobility and all of those kinds of things, economic drivers, social impact. And as it comes down, that designs the framework within which the next thing happens. So town planning happens at the next phase. So certain contexts are already laid out by the regional plans within which city planning happens. Certain contexts are laid out already by the city plan in which urban design happens, and then, of course, down like that. And we, as people living in a house, we only have small modifications that we are able to make. We are living in a particular context. So that's the scale spectrum. So in that, I want to say that this happened, Roget's galaxy happened in 1968. At that time, towns were planned by architects and master planners. So Roget was that. In this particular case, the galaxy happened and where it was going to be placed happened next. So, there is not that much connection between a concept and the land, or in the context. So it is placed in a context. So that's what happened then. Over the years, of course, the setting it in the context started happening. Everyone was involved in it, including Roger. I remember meeting him, I don't remember, 2003 when I first came or something, when I showed the ridge and showed all this environmental stuff. He said, oh, but if that's the case, how am I going to work? How am I going to build a city? So that era, that's when Brasilia happened, that's when Chandigarh happened, that's when a lot of things happened where the architect and the master planner is determining what's going to be designed and then placed in a context. This is in the 70s. This is Ian McCarthy, who wrote a book that was published in 1969. And that is when environment came into the picture. I mean, he says the shaping of land for human use ought to be based on an understanding of natural processes. So he brought in that thing in the world. I mean, it wasn't something that everybody was thinking about. Maybe people in little pockets, people actually more in tune with living with nature. Of course, for them it was a habit. It was something that they never even questioned. But for the planning field, this was a new thing. When he talked about all of this, he wasn't very popular during that time. And then so he says here that, people operated in different silos. So the physical scientist had his own expertise. Social scientists had their own expertise. Everybody had their own expertise. But they were not working together with each other. So they were, and definitely they were not knowing anything about planning. They knew where the water is coming from and all, but how it gets integrated into planning, no. So, and he says that if you talk about design, they ran away screaming. So he took the time to build this kind of ecosystem of different knowledge, streams in the understanding in planning, so that now it wasn't a master planner who said, okay, it was these guys who informed the master planner in what they designed, what he or she designed. Yet the design element stayed with the master planner. These provided information, but the integration part was still left to the master planner or the designer. In that process, he brought in this whole thing where you had all this information on transparent sheets that you overlaid in order to understand the different aspects of the landscape. And of course, eventually it became what we now call GIS, Geographic Information Systems, where we can actually bring in all these layers to understand how everything interacts, because everything builds one on top of the other. So you'll have a topography, and then hydrology, soil types, vegetation, human use, land use, land tenure. Everything builds on the landscape. And he used to call it the layer cake method, that you had these layers, and then you analyzed it, and then you proposed your design. So this image showed the work that was done with Doshi in 2009 in integrating all the different elements into a common base and having that inform all the planning. It was a precursor, you can say, to do the planning. Falls within the same realm that you collect all the information from all these, and then you do your design. Now, in this decade, the last decade, there is another framework that has emerged, which has to do with the fact that it is not the design, so the design professions is here, so that includes everybody from architect to town planner to regional planner. These are the sciences. Now it includes the people of the place. So that means people who are going to be living or are already living in the area that you are proposing something. Information technologies, of course, are the integration, are also determining how that happens. And this all of these elements are working together, and they are informing what is happening here. So the design, so it's a common It's a common purpose, common, so they evolve the common vision, they evolve the common brief, if you will, and they evolve the common design as well. Each one brings their expertise, but the collective owns the, is vested into the result that is design. This is relatively new in terms of the terminology, geodesign, you may not have heard of it. I think the Citizens Assembly, for example, is another effort, I think, in line with these kinds of, these kinds of processes where the participation of the people as equal members to the design process is recognized. So geodesign requires collaboration among the design professions, graphical sciences, information technology, and people of the place. So anyway, so this is something that I think even our Constitution, by passing the 73rd and 74th Amendment, recognizes, which is called Panchayati Raj Act, in which they have given the authority to design and develop the local area according to the people. So that's why Gram Sabhas are empowering the... So different places, different movements have happened which support this whole participation of the people in the process of design. This is what we are here for. I am here for this. And in that, you can see that the third one talks about Auroville wants to be the bridge between the past and the future, taking advantage of all discoveries from without and within. Auroville will boldly spring towards future realizations. I think this is what we are talking about here. It's almost like a divine adesh, you would say, to keep up with what is happening outside and what is happening inside, and the evolution that even the planning field has gone through to reach where we are, where you had the part that I just explained. So some of us, me in particular, feel compelled that it would be a disservice or not being a true Aurovillian if I were not to respect this and say, I have to bring in all the knowledge that I have gained, even in the planning profession, to what is happening in Auroville. And in fact, I would want Auroville to be the beacon to the world where they can say, this is how we do things here. This is what the world should emulate. That's what I would like to see. So I'll end with this slide. Thank you.
Lata, thank you very much for this very, very informative and intense presentation. I have a question relating to the intersection of the village and Auroville, especially related to the crown. We have Bharatipuram coming very close to the crown. The aspirations of the village for development is slightly different from or maybe there's a big difference with the aspirations of Auroville for development.
Correct.
So have you considered that in the projections while you made the crown planning?
Yes, yes.
How have you
so it has not addressed their future. It is because it's addressing more the present, because the demand of us was how do we move forward at the present. But in the framework of the people of the place, they are people of the place as well. So they have to have a seat at the table when all of that is being discussed, not just us saying, this is what, so they have a role to play there. How it is organized, how we ensure meaningful participation, because currently it's all political mobilization, right? So, that is very important. So it's not like, just have them at the table and everything is going to work. No, we may have discord. So we have to figure out, that's a challenge we face on an everyday basis, and we have to face also, we have to live up to that challenge as well. So we have to find frameworks within which they can come in and be part of the process royally and not be pulled here and there by just political, interests. That happens all the time. So we see it all the time. So, not just that we are free of it, we have it also within ourselves. So it's not like, oh, those guys are political guys, we don't do it. We do it also. So.
Hi, Lata, thanks. I just wanted to clarify because you didn't mention who is we. You kept on saying we.
Just Prashant and I.
Okay.
Okay, I will just want to I think since you asked that question, I'll say that when Madam asked us to do this, we talked, of course, we were still in the second mode. We could not have a truly participatory process because the fact was we were given just a week. So we actually talked to all, whoever, we, through our networks, we reached out to many people in order to find what is it that they aspire for this place and all that, and we integrated that. So the team, actually, it wasn't just Prashant and me, it was Tejaswini as well, Suhasini, Dharmesh, but I think towards the end it was just Prashant and I who finalized, yeah. But anyway, you can see it only as a perspective. You don't necessarily have to see it. It is our perspective, You take it or you leave it.
You have any idea of the infrastructure? Because that seems to be the bone of contention. So I'm putting it out there. Because you showed all these different, parts of the crown that you did. Do you have any idea how because you said where Darkhali is and it could be smaller and more.
No, the infrastructure corridor currently in contention is the cable right now.
Yeah.
And the cable in Darkhali has already been laid. So it's not a contentious one right now, really speaking. I mean, it is made to be a contentious one, but it's not really. Because it is possible to lay cable. And people lay cables under the sea, It is possible to lay cables. I'm not saying we should lay it under the sea or we should lay it in waterlogged areas. I'm not saying that. But that is a technical solution that needs to be found for infrastructure. You need to be able to provide it. You need to be able to provide it in whatever fashion you want in terms so that it is a loop. That is what I've been told. It has to be a loop. It has to have access. Now the access is just going around in circles. No, not necessarily. You have to have points of access. I think the encasing has to be modular. For example, I have mapped utility networks, in my life also. So you have nodes, you have junctions, you have, so it's mapped in a particular way, and then when a fault arises, you know exactly where the fault is because the sensor tells you, and you send your dispatch over there. So I've even worked on applications that do the application, as in software applications, that do the dispatches as well. This is where the fault is, how to rush there and repair it and make it operational. There are so many, so I wouldn't go, besides, I'm not a technical expert on infrastructure, right? Because that's where the experts come into, my expertise lies in more of the stuff that I talked about, less on all of these, although I'm just saying, since I've mapped some, I'm saying that that's how it works. So you have to have it, and you have to have access to it. How it's done is totally up to the designer.
Thanks, Lata. I was glad when you brought Ian McHarg into the picture because since yesterday I've been kind of thinking about this whole exercise of looking at it as essentially a landscape architecture exercise, which
I missed the first part. Who into it?
Ian McHarg.
Okay. Mm-hmm. I studied under him, so I know him very well.
I'm a landscape architect also. Okay. So, so to sort of go back and revisit maybe some of these, maybe contemporary planning principles. Ian McHarg, of course, was working in his 60s, and he's sort of looking at it, these layers as sort of these almost fixed layers,
Right.
Whereas when we're looking at now in more contemporary landscape architecture discourse, we are looking at it as much more dynamic, much more politicized at many levels, ecologically, at a human level also. So the kind of research I see that could really inform is not just sort of this quantitative research, but also a lot of qualitative work.
Qualitative as well.
Because that will help you really give a very nuanced understanding of, the data.
I believe
So-
that that's where social scientists come in also. I mean, to some extent, because, or anthropology. I mean, there's a vast, science over there, science or practice. Okay, let's not call it science, but practice that informs those kinds of elements.
So would in the like a larger planning process, in like planning as such, are you kind of talking to some of these so-called experts, or like
I'm not-
anthropologists, or
No,
or
because-
I'm just, it's not just for you
Yeah,
the question.
because
it's
I'm not
for
in
the
the
whole.
position of a planner here right
Yeah.
now. I mean, I'm not I'm not in the TDC or, where I've been brought in here, and even in this process, as someone who knows something, who's done something in the past, more as an expert in that sense of certain specific domains. Obviously, I don't claim to know all the, and I also want to say that a planner, or the design professional has to have a generalized understanding, general understanding of all the domains, but the experts are the one who bring in those details and are bringing it to the table. That's why it becomes more important in the geodesign framework that I said, which many other there are many other frameworks that exist also. In 2009, there was a group that had come from Europe somewhere, and they had a similar kind of collaborative framework as well. They came again, I think, a few years ago. So I think essentially I'm saying I don't know. I'm saying I myself don't know everything, but we need to involve the people who know into the process so that it is complete and it is able to take into account everybody's understanding and aspirations.
Are there any more questions?
Yeah, I want to say one thing. This is anecdotal since we still have some time. We don't have any questions, right? Oh, okay.
Like you showed in the green belt that we have only about 30%, 33% of the land. What are the dangers of planning when currently, right now, I'm just speaking like when we design, we don't have those parcels of land, and then we plan it from that perspective that we have that. It's not just I don't know, does it make sense as a question? But it generally, when we are looking at the maps, we look at these two circles, the green belt and then the city area. But when we actually look at the real maps, it kind of gives a very different perception of what we have at hand. So while we are looking at different kinds of maps, like a conceptual or the reality, it kind of tends to give us a picture in a different way.
Actually,
also.
that's true. I should have included a land status map as well, because that informs what we do as well. Because we cannot willy-nilly open anything up, because there are speculators, there are, interests that will start developing the moment we put, or start building, We have to look at our growth rate as well. I mean, we have been growing in terms of numbers. We aspire to go faster with numbers, but what numbers are they? That we have to look at. What are the kind of people that we want to attract here? What are the institutions that will foster those kinds of people coming here? So that also needs to be thought about. And that is something that I think, we don't have anybody that is presenting, at least I couldn't see, except one person who did on economy, supposedly in the morning, which I didn't attend. But that angle is very important as well, because that determines when we build something, what impact is it going to have on all of those things? Will people just hold on to their land because, that needs to be thought. And, there are experts who can inform us about it fully. I understand it, some of it, but of course I don't understand all of it, how that whole economic structure works there when you open up an area. And sure, the numbers will increase, development will happen, but,
Yeah, so just one more small thing. Like when we say from right now 3,500, but aspiring to 50,000 number, which is a huge gap then, we say, then do you think it makes sense to really, really pay attention a lot to phasing it out? And
planning is all about phasing. Planning is about iterative processes. So that's why we even have Even from that time, we had master plan 20 years or 15 years, whatever. We had development plans for every 5 years, but they are still like developed. But the thinking is that when you do a master plan for 20 years, 25 years, and you do a development plan for 5 years, and you do your annual implementation plan for 1 year, what happens in that 1 year demands that you go back and rework the development plan. What happens in the development plan goes back and reworks the master plan. So let's say if we projected we are going to be 10,000 in X number of years, in the master plan, the detailed development plan will say, okay, in the first 5 years, we are going to be so many people. Now, and in the annual plan, it will say we are planning for 1,000 people, let's say. I mean, this is just, arbitrary. For those, now if we see that in that first year, we haven't reached the 1,000, we need to relook why, we need to examine, and then that is the ideal process, if you will, right? So there is always a back and forth. It's like always, and it's in that sense iterative. So that's where, you go in, you go in circles, yeah, sorry. Spirals, yeah.
Thank you very much for your presentation. What assumptions would you suggest the Dreamweavers take, for example, on mobility, phasing, and the regional aspects in their conceptual work, as they're trying to inspire some flavors in this DDP preparation? So the assumptions, I know you've listed some, but what are the things you would highlight?
These are the ones I highlighted. I have a whole list of them. I only brought here what I thought needed to be highlighted, and that I thought probably will not find a place in the other presentations. For example, I know there is a presentation on development priorities that's coming down the pike. And I know that will talk about our growth numbers, where are we growing, how are we doing. So I did not touch upon any of those things which need to inform you as well. This is only coming from the hat that I wear, which is of an ecological planner. And so, whatever I could bring for that,
Can you share your full set with the Dreamweavers?
Yeah, I'll share with you what I have worked on so far over the years. So I told you about the Crown guidelines for just the residential zone 1 and 2. Also, there are planning guidelines that is for the entire city. And there are numerous studies and all that which are there, which also may have some impact, on what you're doing. But the scale at which you're operating is not so I have, from my perspective, pretty much brought but if I think about something else, somebody pointed out about the land status, for example, that has an impact. Mobility needs to be looked at much more carefully, which we haven't really looked in this part. We had done that, like I said, a while ago, but that's outdated because it changes. So, yeah. So I want to just say one thing. This is anecdotal information, but this is to stress about this whole third part of the charter. Chamanlalji, as some of you know, Chamanlalji, this is my first introduction to Chamanlalji. He had come home looking for us because he had heard something had happened to us and he was afraid we'll leave Auroville or something. So he came, and during that conversation, he said that the first of these environment conferences that happened, like Glasgow happened right now, the first one happened in 1972 in Sweden, Stockholm, I think, yeah. And they were, at that time, only 2 heads of states. Of course, one was the Swedish Prime Minister, who was Olof Palme, and the other one was Indira Gandhi, who went to the conference. You have to bear in mind that this is when the people had kind of recognized that environment is an important, part of our life, and our survival depends on what we do. And so, in that conference, Mother sent Roger and Chamanlalji. Even at that time, she anticipated that this is an important topic that our guys who are working here need to understand. So, so essentially, I guess my point being that I think there is a lot of, things that we just can take from that just that example, that we have to constantly redesign ourselves as well, and our thinking based on all the circumstances that we are faced with.